All right. Hello, everyone. Day is the 21st of October, 2024. So I'm happy to welcome everyone to the O1 Labs crypto seminar. I'm giving a long introduction today just to give more context to people. Today we're very happy to host Marek Sefranek. Is it Sh? I hope.
Yeah, that's fine.
Either
way.
Either it's also Sefranek.
I mean, the original version is like that, but yeah.
Okay.
No one really knows that, so.
No, I figured out because it sounds very like Slavic. Yeah, that would make sense more. So yeah, Marek will be talking about his paper called "How Not to Simulate PLONK," which is a discussion on the zero-knowledge property of PLONK, and finds a security vulnerability in the original version of the paper, and discusses how it can be fixed. So I saw this talk before, and I was very curious about how this applies to our own O1 Labs PLONK variant called Kimchi. So I hope we can have a discussion today. I wanted to remind people a bit about the seminar format. So this is 1 hour, and we try to leave a bit more space to the discussion and question than we did last time. So I hope like we can have at least 15, 20, 25 minutes of discussion. I also we also discussed it during the week, last week, and we kind of agreed that by default we would like people to ask questions during talk and not postpone everything to the end. So if you don't feel comfortable, you don't understand something, just ask it during the talk, because it's, I think, a very nice paper to discuss in particular. So let's not just look at it and then say, okay. So I think that's it for me. That being said, Marek Sefranek and how to not simulate PLONK.
All right. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. If you have any questions, just feel free to ask us during the talk. Of course, at the end, we will have more time. Yeah, so I will start by just briefly recalling what zero-knowledge proofs are. So we have a protocol between a prover and a verifier, and the goal is the prover wants to convince the verifier that some statement is in some NP relational language, and this prover has this X and W, where X is the statement, W is the witness. Think of this maybe as either some computation on some circuit, or maybe there's a public key and the prover wants to show that it knows the secret key, so X would be the public key, W the secret key. And then we want to convince now the verifier that we know this value W by interacting in some kind of protocol without revealing anything about W. Maybe a bit more formally, we want these zero-knowledge proofs to satisfy 3 properties. So the first 2 are completeness and soundness, which basically ensure that the verifier only accepts at the end of this protocol if the original statement was true. So in more detail, the completeness property is just if both parties are honest and interact, and the prover is proving a true statement, then the verifier will always accept. And the soundness is a property where we want to protect the verifier from cheating provers. So it shouldn't be possible for any cheating prover, no matter which strategy it uses. It doesn't have to follow the original protocol. It shouldn't be able to convince the verifier of a false statement. And then I guess now the namesake property, so zero knowledge. So intuitively, again, we don't want to reveal anything about this witness W. But the way this is formalized is we use the so-called simulation paradigm, where we say if we can efficiently simulate the view of the verifier only given the statement X, not having access to this witness, then this proof has to be zero knowledge. And intuitively, you can think about this in the following way. So if you can simulate this, it means then the verifier, instead of speaking to the prover, it can just simulate a proof, and then it will get like a random instance of a proof, which will look indistinguishable from interacting with the real prover. And that's why the proof cannot leak anything that the verifier couldn't have already computed on their own. All right, so this is the I guess classical zero knowledge proofs. So then we have the ZK snarks, and they are PLONK is one of those. So ZK snark is a specific kind of zero knowledge proof It stands for zero knowledge, succinct, non-interactive argument of knowledge. So let's go over these buzzwords briefly. So the proof is now non-interactive, which means the prover just sends a single message to the verifier. There's no interaction. Basically, we just send a proof and the verifier can verify. Then we want this proof to be succinct, which means that it should be much shorter than the witness we have in our statement. In some cases, the length of the proof can even be independent of the length of the witness. Which, for example, in the case of PLONK will be the case, which is very nice from a practical point of view. And I guess it's also an argument of knowledge, because now we don't only consider just the soundness property, where we shouldn't be able to prove false statements, but we additionally have so-called knowledge soundness, where if I convince you as a prover, this also implies that I really know a witness. So even if you're trying to prove a true statement, but I don't know the witness W, then I shouldn't be able to convince the verifier. For example, there's like some trivial languages, for example, knowing the discrete logarithm to some element, like basically any instance will be in the language, but you actually have to know this witness to have some meaningful information that you want to prove. So, and what changes here now, because this seems a bit a strong object that we can non-interactively prove something like this in zero knowledge. So that's why we usually the model here is extended. So now we need a trusted setup. And what this means is that we have a third trusted party, or we have some multi-party MPC protocol, MPC computation, a multi-party computation, and they set up some public parameters called the common reference string, and this is given to both the prover and the verifier. So everyone has access to the same CRS. And now also what changes is, because there's an impossibility result to obtain both soundness and zero knowledge in this setting, we need to give the verifier an additional verifier. The simulator now for the zero knowledge, we need to give them additional power, and that's now they're in addition to like trying to simulate basically these proofs pi, only knowing this value x, not knowing w, they now also are allowed to simulate the CRS and set it up. And in this process, usually there's some secret information that's used to generate the CRS, and the simulator will then also know this trapdoor. So this basically, if you think about it from the point of view of a verifier, so the verifier does not know this trapdoor, because otherwise it could, or if anyone basically knew this trapdoor, they could forge proofs, and they could make us accept false statements. But we will see that later on in the when I go into the technical definition of zero knowledge here, this will come in very handy. All right, so just now I want to give you a few quick facts about PLONK. So it's a state-of-the-art ZK snark by Gabison, Williamson, and Chopotaru. It has constant size proofs of roughly just half a kilobyte to prove any statement, and these can be verified in milliseconds. Nice thing is that we have a so-called universal and updatable structured reference string, which means in previous snarks we had like Graph16. The problem is that once you do the setup, this CRS, it will be kind of circuit dependent. If you you basically for any new circuit, for any new computation you want to prove, you will need a different CRS. But PLONK, you can do like a single setup, and then works for arbitrary computations or proving statements of arbitrary size up to some bound that you have chosen when generating this SRS. And also can be updated in a fashion that even like you don't have, as long as single party is honest during this procedure of updating this SRS, you can trust that the whole SRS leaks no information. Then coming back to these properties, so the knowledge soundness property is originally proved using two idealized models. We're using this algebraic group model and the random oracle model together. And there's a new result by Liebma et al., where they achieved to prove knowledge soundness just using the random oracle model. which is nice because this model has been around for quite some time now, and we are very confident in this random oracle model. This algebraic group model is relatively new, and it's still possible that at some point someone manages to break this model and show us some attacks. But that would be very groundbreaking research results if you can break that. Another nice feature is PLONK supports custom gates and lookup gates. So, okay, now maybe what I didn't say is when I talk about circuits, I guess most of you are probably familiar with that. So this is usually the language we use, this NP-complete language of circuits to express any statement. And normally these circuits are just over some finite field, and we have this addition and multiplication operations for this finite field. But here in PLONK, we also have these custom gates, which means they can compute more complex operations. For example, if you have an elliptic curve group, you could have like a single gate that computes elliptic curve point addition or even other operations, which makes basically the size of the circuits much smaller because you don't have to use all these addition multiplication gates to express some more complex operation. And the second thing here, these lookup gates are also very nice. They allow you to check that some values in some range in any subset of the field, which can be really helpful to do some bitwise operations or other things more efficiently. Okay, and finally, of course, PLONK is also widely used and deployed in many real projects. I have just listed a few of them on the slide. All right, so I guess all of this sounds really nice. Unfortunately, in the original PLONK paper, they never proved that it actually achieves zero knowledge. They just claimed this, but did not prove it. They didn't even define a notion of zero knowledge they're trying to achieve. And then when I looked at the paper, I studied the paper, and I was trying to simulate PLONK and simulate proofs to show that it's zero knowledge. I actually managed to find a vulnerability in the zero knowledge, and I proposed a fix, and later, I guess also in this work, I show that with this fix we can actually simulate and we obtain or we achieve zero knowledge. I also show that the previous version has shown an attack on the previous version. But I guess we'll see all of this later in the talk. And the notion, but I guess this will become next. So now I want to go over the definition of zero knowledge, which is quite technical. So that there's like three different notions. I will start with the one that's actually achieved by PLONK. It's called statistical zero knowledge. And the definition goes as follows. So there should exist some PPT, so this is probabilistic polynomial time, or you can think of this as just efficient simulator S, such that for all size bounds N and all adversaries, now all adversaries here means really even unbounded adversaries, we want that even unbounded adversaries cannot tell whether they're interacting with the real snark or with the simulator. And so this expression looks a bit cryptic, but let's go over it slowly. So we have basically two probabilities here, which represent these two worlds. And we want the difference between these two to be negligible. I guess one thing. So this on the left-hand side, we'll have like the adversary interacting with the normal snark. I guess I should say I use pre-processing snarks, which consist of 4 algorithms. This setup algorithm, there is a pre-process algorithm, which takes some instance and gives us prover and verifier parameters. Then we have the proof algorithm, and then there's a verifier algorithm. So, and the way this interaction goes here is we first honestly generate this structured reference string. Then the adversary sees it. So it's kind of an adaptive notion where the adversary can adapt which statement it chooses as its target. So it basically can output any, now this will be an indexed relation. So we have, think of this I maybe as a arithmetic circuit. This X will be the public inputs to the circuit, and this W will be the private inputs to the circuit. So the adversary can choose the statement. Now we pre-process the parameters, and here the adversary is then given an honestly computed proof using the statement and witness that the adversary chose. And then at the end, the adversary has to output a bit. And basically here on the right-hand side, we have exactly the same interaction, except that we replace the setup here by the simulator doing the setup and also having some trapped or tau here. And then when the proof, when it gets the statement from the adversary, it actually doesn't, so the simulator doesn't get the witness W here, but it has this trapdoor here, and then it tries to simulate the proof. And again, the adversary tries to output a bit, trying to distinguish these two worlds, and they win if they can output. The probability they output a different bit in these two worlds is non-negligible or big. So
sorry, Mark, can I interrupt you for a second? I'm not sure if you see the hand or do you just see your slides?
Yeah, I just see my slides.
Okay,
maybe
then I will.
Is it
okay if I just interrupt you every now and then?
Yeah, sure. So if there's anything, just interrupt.
Okay, I wanted to double check that I understand the proper-os function, because I think I haven't seen it used very often. So the index I, so when you set it up for like a family of languages, and the index I is selecting the particular instance of the language. So, or what is it?
So okay, there's like a little bit of maybe I should have simplified notation here. I just basically took my notation from the paper here to give you the full definition. So another detail I skipped here is, so this R will be the relation, and the notation R subscript N means it's basically the restricted relation over instances that have size at most N. And you can think of this, the size basically being the size of this index here, which will be the circuit. So basically during the setup, you can choose the size N here, which will kind of restrict what is, I guess, the maximum number of gates or something like that we support, that we can prove statements about.
Okay, so I mean, thinking about PLONK, this is just, you're just modeling the height of the of the SRS basically. So whenever adversary is targeting a certain instance, it targets it up to the certain degree I. So I is polynomial degree up to like.
Oh, sorry. So I here is not a degree. I is so normally if you have just a relation, you would just expect X and W, right? That's probably, you're familiar with that. What I'm using here is so-called index relations, where the statement is basically both I and X is actually the full statement, and W is the witness. And the statement is has two parts. One is the circuit, and the second part will be, because if you fix the circuit, you can still have different public inputs here. So, and I guess the reason is because we have this pre-process algorithm here, which given some circuit I, it outputs us specific prove and verify parameters, which we then can use to prove statements about this circuit. So the point is, compared to like I guess graph 16 or some snark, which is not universal, difference is this SRS can really be used to prove anything up to some. So we really have to just run this a single time. But every time we change the circuit I, we have to do this pre-processing step. So this thing still is kind of circuit dependent. But we don't need any, like here there's no secret information. This is like a deterministic procedure, this pre-process, and that's much easier to do than having this setup procedure where if something goes wrong or someone is malicious, the whole system could break.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I think originally my original formulation was correct. So it's just a family of languages, and the pre-processing step just converts your universal setup to a particular setup, like generates some concrete polynomials, I guess. Okay.
Right. So just so this was statistical ZK, but I just want to very quickly show you the difference. So perfect ZK is basically everything is the same. The only thing that changes here is that these two probabilities should actually be identical. So here now, really can basically perfectly simulate everything. In this statistical ZK notion, you can think of this negligible part being something like maybe there's some value of the SRS, which is just a single one where we cannot actually simulate or something. But then for all the other SRS, we can simulate, and that's why if there's enough different like S values for the SRS, it will still be statistically ZK, but not perfectly ZK. And then finally, there's also the computational ZK, the weakest notion, where now we restrict the adversaries to PPT, efficient adversaries, and this is again the same expression as in the statistical ZK. All right. So and in PLONK we care about the what I show basically is that the old version did not have statistical ZK, and with the fix we can achieve this notion.
So Mark, you need to just speak, okay, because no one sees your arm.
Yes. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I had a question. So I've seen some definition of statistical ZK that do not take into account an adversary, but just says that the output distribution of the simulator and the normal process, are very close. Is there? So I guess the definition are equivalent. Is there a reason that you use that one?
Yeah, there's an important difference, and these definitions are kind of, though they exist, basically difference is there's adaptive and non-adaptive zero knowledge. But in my opinion, the standard notion should be the adaptive one here, which means if I have this setup here, the adversary really gets to choose the statement depending on the SRS. Because in practice, this SRS is out there, and as the adversary, you can choose the statement you want to forge, right? So why should the non-adaptive version would basically be okay? We just say okay for all statements in the language or for all these tuples in the relation here at the top, these two distributions of the proofs should be close or equivalent in the case of perfect ZK. But then you don't have this adaptive notion here, because you see, like in this step, this could make a difference to the other notion that you just mentioned, because here we really choose depending on this value, and that changes. Okay. So like what I'm trying to say is, imagine there's maybe for every SRS there exists some trivial statement where the system is broken. So then it would not satisfy this notion here, because then the adversary would always pick the statement based on the SRS that breaks this. But if you have the original or like the non-adaptive definition, then since the SRS is chosen at random, the probability that for a fixed statement, this SRS will be the one where the statement is broken will be very small, and then you could still satisfy the other notion of zero knowledge, this non-adaptive one. I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, no, the adaptive things make sense, but yeah, I'm not sure.
I mean, if you don't, I don't know how you would define it if there's no adversary, how you would define that these two distributions should be close to each other, like statistically close to each other.
Yeah, no, you're right. I do need an adversary to do that.
If there's no A here, then we could just say like in the top part here for all statements in Rn, and then define some like two distributions.
What if I just instead of asking the adversary to choose a Boolean, I just stop the process when the pi are output, and I compare the output distribution of those process.
So can you say that again? Sorry.
So basically, you do only the first line of the process.
Mm-hmm.
So these two things output a proof.
Yeah.
I can just say that those two processes have a very close output.
You could just transcript indistinguishability up to step 4, I guess.
Yeah.
So
I think it's equivalent. It's not very important. We don't need to.
I think it's important that let me just think for a second. Maybe it's equivalent. Yeah, I think it's probably something I would really have to write down and really think about in detail to give you like a definitive answer. But yeah, it could be equivalent. But you would still have some adversary here, right? So then, yeah, I don't know if this is much simpler or but all right. Okay, so now to actually start speaking more about PLONK, let's first recap the KCG polynomial commitment scheme, which is used in. You can use other schemes, but at least in the version of the paper of PLONK, they use the scheme because it has very, very short constant size commitments. So what is a polynomial commitment scheme? The goal is for some polynomial over a finite field, I want to be able to commit to this polynomial in a way that later on I can open, or I can prove to you that it evaluates at any point x. I can prove to you that it evaluates to the value y, without having to send you the whole polynomial. You know, this polynomial here could have, I know, quite like 1 million coefficients or something, but we will see like KCG allows us to do this in a way that we only have to send a single group element. Yeah, so now this KCG scheme, that's also where PLONK inherits it's like just a setup, or it's structured reference string. So this scheme works over bilinear groups, and these public parameters we get here are these powers of tau of these two generators. In the first generator, so in the first group goes up to tau to the d, and then the second one just up to tau. And this value d will be basically the maximum degree of polynomials we can commit to. And the commitment is quite simple. So for the polynomial of degree up to d, the commitment C will just be you take all these powers of tau in the generator, and then you raise them to the power of fi, like to the fi coefficient in your polynomial. And then if you do the math here, basically this becomes the sum here in the exponent, and the sum is exactly, basically you're able to evaluate this polynomial f in tau in the exponent of this group without knowing this value tau. And this will be the commitment, and we will see these kind of expressions soon in PLONK. All right, yeah, and now I will give a very, very simplified overview of how PLONK works, or what the main step is. So we have some kind of polynomial z of x, which has roots at all the powers of some primitive nth root of unity over some finite field. And then the main thing the prover wants to show is that this polynomial divides some constrained polynomial that somehow captures all the witnesses in the circuit and in the computation. And this divisibility then will imply that the prover correctly computed the circuit. But instead of, dividing C by Z, and then there's some quotient polynomial T, and we send all of this, we use now the KCG polynomial commitment scheme. So the prover will commit to its constrained polynomial C, which will not be a single polynomial in the actual PLONK, but multiple polynomials that are then combined to the C polynomial. And then we get some resulting quotient T of X, which we also commit to. But now, we will see a little, I guess, a thing that's not so nice about this quotient of PLONK is that the degree of this value T will be 3n, where n is the number of gates in the circuit. But all the other polynomials in our proof, because in the KCG we saw here we need this up to the power of d, but all the other polynomials in PLONK are only of degree roughly n. And just because of the single quotient here, we would have to triple the size of this SRS, and this SRS is basically already the bottleneck of PLONK. It can be quite long. Yeah, so this is not so nice. And and that's why in PLONK they use an optimization to shrink the degree of the quotient polynomial somehow to degree n, which of course doesn't work directly, but they use the following strategy. So they split this polynomial T, which is of degree 3n, into 3 degree n polynomials, T1, T2, T3, such that when you combine them in this way, so you add T1 plus x to the n times T2 plus x to the 2n times T3, you get back the original quotient. And you can basically think of these polynomials here as T1 is just the n least significant coefficients of the T. T2 will be then the next, n plus 1 up to 2n coefficients of T, and T3 will then be 2n plus 1 up to 3n, the coefficients. Yeah, so we split it in this way, and then we commit, instead of to T, we will commit to these split quotient polynomials. Yeah, so let's have a look at an actual PLONK proof and see what's going on. So that you see it's quite a long expression. I think it's, I always forget 4, 9, I think it has 15 elements. It's 9 G1 elements and 6 field elements. But yeah, you will get a better understanding if I go over it like this. So basically, there's like different parts of the proof that have different functionality or meaning. So this very first part here, these are 4 KCG commitments to these 4 polynomials A, B, C, and I call this polynomial phi, which is the permutation polynomial. These are basically combining them, you get this constrained polynomial that I talked about previously. So we get commitments to these. Then here you see now the resulting split quotient polynomial. We commit to these. So if you didn't do this trick here, you would basically just have a single element here, which would be the commitment to this quotient polynomial. Then we have some batch KCG opening proofs. I will explain what it means because yeah, I mean, it makes much more sense when you see what these final elements are. So these basically will be evaluations of the polynomials of this A, B, C, and phi at certain points. So this delta will be some random verifier challenge. And then we get these evaluations here. These two here are just evaluations of some public polynomials. This is basically just to amortize the verifier because of the verifier to compute this themselves, yeah, it would be much more inefficient. So that's why the prover does this. And then these batched KCG opening proofs, these two basically prove that all these 6 evaluations here are really the correct evaluations of these polynomials here. I mean, okay, more specifically, you see these 6 evaluations here, everything is evaluated at delta, except for this one is delta times omega, where omega is this primitive nth root of unity. And these batch opening proofs, basically this Q1 proof here, this proves that all the 5 evaluations at delta are the correct ones, and this one is not really even batched. It's just a standard KCG opening proof to prove that this polynomial at this different point here evaluates to this value. Okay, so now we have a rough overview of how the PLONK proofs look. Yeah, so now we're finally ready to get into the zero knowledge part. So if you did this in this way, this would not be zero knowledge if this is your witness polynomials and use this kind of like KCG commitment is a deterministic commitment scheme. There's no randomness. We just commit to the evaluation at tau of our polynomial in the exponent. So yeah, let's see how PLONK tries to achieve zero knowledge, what the main technique is they use. So I describe it here in a more general case where we just have any subset of our field S. But yeah, in the case of PLONK, this will basically be this primitive nth root of unity and then the subgroup H generated by omega up to a power of n. But this could also be just, I don't know, values like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, just some values. And this vanishing polynomial here, ZS, will have roots exactly at all the elements in S. And then if we now take any polynomial, we can use the following strategy to randomize it. And that's what they do in PLONK. If you pick a random degree D polynomial rho, and then you add to your original polynomial this rho times this vanishing polynomial ZS, like this, then what you can show is that if you now evaluate this new polynomial called f tilde at any up to D minus 1 points, which come from the field, but they are not allowed to be inside of the set S. So any values in the field which are not in S, then these evaluations of this polynomial will just be uniformly random values. And maybe you already see the connection to the PLONK proof here. So basically what we would like is that here we have an evaluation of A at tau, and here of A at delta. We would like these two values to look like random values so we can simulate them. Yeah, and maybe one key observation is also why do we do it in this way? So note that we want that this polynomial f that we have here, this should be divisible by ZS. And if we do it in this way, then we preserve this property. So basically, if this new polynomial f tilde is divisible by ZS, if and only if the original polynomial was also divisible by ZS, because we add a multiple of ZS here. Yeah, and what you also see here is now that the degree of this polynomial that we choose, the random polynomial, kind of defines at how many different points we can do these evaluations without leaking any information about the original polynomial f. Like, I just do it quickly, more concrete. Maybe it comes to the next slide. Okay, let's go. Let's have a look at a visualization I tried to give you of how this randomization technique works. So now, let's say these first few points here is our set S that we fixed, and then we want to have some polynomial that has specific values over this set S. So we can interpolate some polynomial here. So this will be now a polynomial f. And the way we randomize the polynomial is that we basically choose a polynomial of a higher degree that still has the same values over this domain S, but then looks completely different over all the other values in our finite field. And yeah, you can choose arbitrary polynomials here. So you get like a lot of possible polynomials that look like this. And then later on, if you so I have to really stress this. So basically, again, here, these points where we can evaluate, they're not allowed to be in S, because we can clearly see right here, like these randomized polynomials, they still have the same evaluations here. But if we evaluate outside of S, we see that we would basically get some random values. Yeah, and there's of course a formal way to prove this in the paper, but I hope this gives some intuition. Okay, and now I can finally get more concrete how PLONK uses it. So we have these 4 witness polynomials, and the prover now randomizes them. So I gave you the example with this A polynomial here. So the original polynomial would be something like this, where these yi's are the values assigned to the wires in your circuit. And this is like a Lagrange interpolation of these values, but you don't take this as your polynomial A, but you add here this random linear polynomial multiplied by the C polynomial, which is exactly the technique just described. And then the nice thing about this is that all these evaluations in the proof, also these KCG commitments use evaluations basically at tau, are now just uniform random values. And this means to simulate, we can just pick random values for these, and yeah, it's really nice. So now we kind of see, okay, this part and this part, that this is just some public polynomial. This is easy to simulate. You can just evaluate it. But what about the rest here? So these t's here are this quotient polynomial, and these q's are these KCG opening proofs. And these, so since remember that the simulator is allowed to pick this or know this value tau, because it gets to set up the SRS. And I can just tell you that for these q's are just like deterministic functions in tau. Like if you pick random values for these, you will be able to compute these values here. It's just a deterministic function in tau that you can compute. So the only part that's now something could go wrong now in the original PLONK is this t, these commitments to the t's. And yeah, that's exactly where things break down. So the vulnerability is we can simulate the value to the original quotient evaluated at tau. This is again similar to these q's here. It's just a deterministic function in tau. And now this would work. So basically, if you committed not to the split t's, but to the original t, then this would be zero knowledge. But if you split it, then we basically get now more information than just this t of tau. And this leaks too much information about the original quotient polynomial. And yeah, now the proof is no longer independent of the witness. Okay, so this was the thing I observed. And how can we make sure that these values are more random? So this will now be the fix. So we now have to use a different randomization technique than the one used for the original witness polynomials. As here we have this kind of structure, but for these t's we have a different kind of structures I will show you. So what we want is that these t's, they should combine to the original t using this equation. So we can do is we can randomize them in a way that they still combine in this way. They still satisfy this equation, but are uniform random. And the way it works is you just pick a random R1 scalar in the field, and then you add R1 times x to the n to your first polynomial here, but you also subtract this R1 from the T2 here, which then cancels out. And then you also take a random value R2, you add some stuff here to the T2, you subtract again from the T3, and now you basically have defined new polynomials, T1, T2, T3, still combine into the original T, but they are now, at least if you just get a single evaluation of them, they will be uniform random values, conditioned on satisfying this equation. And now we can simulate them. So as I mentioned, this value T of tau can be simulated. So we can just pick, or we can compute this value as the simulator. And then we just choose two uniform random values for T2 of tau and T3 of tau. And then we just use this equation here to compute the T1 at tau. So now we are really able to produce the same distribution as the honest prover here. So this was the fix. Oh yes.
I have a question. So you're saying that basically the core of the attack is that since we evaluate T in more point than one, we leak more information than what we thought.
So I will go over the attack in the final part of the presentation. So for now, I just try to argue it intuitively at this point that you are able to get this value as a simulator, but to get T1 at tau, T2 at tau, and T3 at tau, you would kind of have to know more information about the whole polynomial T here. But when you do the simulation, you only have this. You can only compute at this point tau, basically the evaluation, but you don't know anything about the other coefficients because these depend. You will basically see in the attack that these other coefficients, of course, they depend on the witness, and as a simulator, you don't have the witness, and by randomizing these three in this way, you make them kind of independent of the witness. But maybe it will. I can talk more about your question at the end when I go over like sketching how you actually show that the old version really is not, because this was just intuition. Of course, you need to prove formally why you need to show some attack on the previous version.
Sure. Thanks.
All right, maybe just a final remark here is the nice thing about this fix, because now we kind of changed the protocol, is that we also preserve the knowledge soundness because we only change some steps in the prover, but the verifier algorithm stays the same. And since knowledge soundness has to, hold for arbitrary prover strategies, this clearly would be one of those. So that's why it still remains knowledge sound. Okay. Now, I don't know how much time I have left, maybe like 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, that'd be good to start wrapping up. Thank you.
Yes. So this is like 3 slides where so the way to really show that the old version without randomizing these T's is not statistically zero knowledge is because it's very hard to show that something is not zero knowledge. You have to show that there cannot exist any simulator. It's much easier to argue that it does not even achieve a weaker property called witness indistinguishability. So if you can kind of break witness indistinguishability, this implies that it cannot be zero knowledge. And just very briefly, it's quite a simple notion. Here again, we have kind of 2 worlds and some adversary. And what the adversary does is it chooses some statement I and X, and then 2 different witnesses that have to satisfy the statement. And in both cases, you just get an honestly computed proof. But in one of the worlds, it uses the first witness, and in the second world, the second witness. And the question is, can you distinguish how these proofs look depending on which witness was used? So now I give a very high level idea, and later I give a concrete example. So basically, we use these blinding scalars, right, to blind the witness polynomials. And since we get some evaluations, we can actually solve a system of linear equations to then recover these blinding scalars that were used, like these row values that were used to blind the polynomials. But maybe one thing I really need to stress here, since we are talking about statistical, this attack will be unbounded. So one thing that I'm assuming here is that if I get any KCG commitment like this one, of course, if I have if we assume d-log is hard, then we wouldn't necessarily learn this value here. But in this like unbounded scenario, we assume if I give you this commitment, you can clearly just compute the d-log. You have as much time as you want, so you always learn these values in the exponent, basically. And this is what we will use here. So so basically, we can compare our guesses against the values that we get here for the T1, T2, and T3. And what I will show you is basically if we use the correct witness, then this test will always pass. But if I use the other witness for proof and do this computation, then this will fail with high probability. And that's why I'm able to distinguish which witness was used, make it more concrete here. So remember, for this A polynomial, we choose two random values, row 1 and row 2 here, and then we add this multiple of the C polynomial here. But since in the PLONK proof, we obtain then the evaluation at tau and at delta of this, we basically get like a system of two linear equations and two unknowns, and can recover these two values, and then we can check how they compare against this. But let's now have a really concrete example. I hope now it will be easier to explain. So now I will show you how to break the old version of PLONK. Again, this will be an unbounded attack. So we have a very easy statement. The statement is just we have a single multiplication gate, and I want to prove to you that I correctly evaluated some multiplication, but you don't even know all these values here are secret to you. I just proved to you that I computed some multiplication. And what happens here is if you can basically compute what this value t of x would look like. Of course, you don't know these values. These are chosen randomly by the prover. You don't know what these row values will be, but you can compute this expression here. Then if you split this accordingly into this t1, t2, and t3, the main thing to see here is that the t2 polynomial here, which will be kind of this t1 is like all these coefficients, the least significant ones. And then the next polynomial would start with this coefficient here. And since there are no more coefficients, this will just be 0. And so what we have here, we have the product here of row 1 times row 3. And this is really nice because we get this value from the prover when it gives us the commitment to T2. And now if we use the correct values, so we can, in this witness distinguishability, we get to choose these witnesses. And if you use the correct ones, and then we use the technique here to recover these candidate values here, depending on W we choose. If you get the correct values, we can just compute the product and check if the product matches the value we got in the PLONK proof. And if this is the case, yeah, we know for sure that we know with high probability that we guessed the correct witness, and that's how we can break this. All right, to wrap up, so in the full paper, there's much more details, all the proofs. So one thing I prove is, again, with the fix, we obtain now statistical zero knowledge, but we need to do this proof in the random oracle model. But I also show that we can achieve computational zero knowledge if we just assume that the hash function is collision resistant in the standard model. And again, this unbounded attack that I just showed you, we go through all the details in the paper, how to really show that this breaks the statistical zero knowledge of PLONK. Right, thanks. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to discuss.
Okay, thanks a lot, Marek. Yes, we do have questions, and there's a question in the chat. So, Marek, can I first read the question from the chat because Daniel, wrote it. So, does kimchi? Oh wait, this is a question to Marek. So the question to you is whether kimchi, which is apparently based in Turbo PLONK, has the same vulnerability described here. I think it's a great question, but I'm not sure if it's to Marek. Marek, do you know if kimchi has this vulnerability or not?
So actually, I found this vulnerability 2022. Because I can try to go back to this tweet here. So this tweet is June 30, 2022. So at that point, I was still a master student. I was happy to fix this and find this. So I didn't spend the time to check all the different implementations of PLONK, what they're doing. I just hope that Ariel's tweet reached all the respective people and that they had time to fix. So I concretely cannot answer the question, but I would hope that since this happened 2 years ago, there was enough time. I don't even know when Kimchi was first introduced, but yeah, I hope it doesn't have this vulnerability.
Aki, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the presentation. I have 2 questions. One of them is, so you say that you do need to access to the evaluation in TU of the polynomials. So then, like, that's not really an attack, right? Because as you said, you need an onboarding adversary.
Yeah, so the main, yeah, I know this can be a bit confusing. Maybe I should really have a bigger disclaimer about this. So in the original PLONK paper, they claimed they obtained statistical zero knowledge. And I showed that it's in fact not statistical zero knowledge, but if you do this little tweak where you randomize, these things here, which is almost zero overhead for you, then you obtain statistical zero knowledge in a proven, like with a security proof. And I showed that this old version really does not satisfy statistical zero knowledge, but what you are asking now is computational zero knowledge.
Yeah, basically, my question is it computational zero knowledge?
And there, the problem is we don't know. The thing is, I think maybe you could come up with some really exotic computational assumption under which you can kind of prove that it is computational ZK. But then the question is, how meaningful is this proof? So I would, so maybe I just go back to my final slide. I would just argue that using this fix and then knowing for sure that you get statistical zero knowledge in the random oracle model, or you get really computational zero knowledge, just assuming collision resistance of the hash function, like in the standard model, this is much better than using this old version where maybe you can somehow prove computational zero knowledge, but most likely you would need to use some non-standard. Like you can't just use like dlog or some standard variant of dlog that we have to prove it. Yeah.
And if we use the generic group model or algebraic group model, you think we could prove the zero knowledge property?
That's I have to think for a second. So then basically, so the problem is, okay, now if you're in the generic group model, the algebraic group model, you're not able to compute these values here, I guess, unless you can break dlog. But then to break zero knowledge, maybe you don't even need to compute the values. That's kind of the problem. Because to break zero knowledge, you just have to distinguish its distributions, and maybe there's like a way, maybe there's some relation over these elements you can somehow check. So yeah, it's basically, I spent some hours thinking about it, also discussing with other people, and there was at least like no clear way to prove or disprove one or the other. But at the end, again, we just decided, and I think everyone is happy, just use the fix, then we have the good security proofs. Yeah. But to really answer the question about GGM and AGM and this old version of PLONK, yeah, I would have to go through more details. I can't answer it on the spot, unfortunately. But it's an interesting remark, because I think I have not tried to prove zero knowledge of the old variant in some idealized model. So maybe except for the ROM, I guess. Okay, ROM, yeah, but no, like this could be interesting to maybe try to see what happens in the AGM or in the GGM.
Thank you.
I have a question. So in this analysis, you're focusing on randomizing some parts of the proof because of the relation with the witness. But in our case in Kimchi, it's not just that we have blinders, but we also increase the degree artificially, the degree of the circuit by adding dummy rows at the end. So every time you're interpolating the polynomials, you have some dummy values at the end. So basically, you still have your polynomials to equal the specified values in your domain, but then you have others that kind of reshape that polynomial in a different way. So I was wondering if you had if you had seen such an implementation before where you obtain those knowledge or improve it by adding these dummy rows at the end, or if you think these two techniques should be used in combination, or yeah, if you have any thoughts about similar things.
Yeah, so I think this is a similar question to what Misha mentioned to me when we met a few weeks ago. Since I still unfortunately did not find like the time to really look at this in detail. So my answer, like the general answer for now, but not unfortunately not like the complete answer, would be to be sure that it works. It's best to construct a simulator and then improve. What I also do in the paper, which I didn't have time to do in this presentation, is show you then how the simulator really works, and then you really have to argue somehow why the distribution, or why these two things here in this definition are close, statistically close. Yeah. So it could, maybe I should really look at this, because I guess working on this, I already have I already learned a few lessons when I did this work. Maybe it will already be, could be easier to now look at another implementation. And
I mean, I'm curious because I'm not familiar with other implementations of PLONK in the industry, but I guess it's not the only place, Kimchi, where these dummy rows are added, because I think this is a technique that I've heard many times before. So that might be a problem with other implementations in the space, not only coming from this vulnerability that you found, but maybe some of the things are not being done properly somewhere else. So I guess this is always a good starting point to just take a look at the actual implementations in real life, and just revisit the type of claims that we are making on our primitives, right? So this is just like for homework for our internal teams. Just maybe we should take a look at these and analyze them ourselves to understand what's going on.
I think it's a good point. We'll just hope. I mean, I've also heard this technique before, and I hope that hopefully enough people looked at this and have some good reason why it's secure. Like, I mean, I was even surprised that I found this vulnerability in PLONK. I guess the reason why I was able to find it is just going back to the proof. Where is it? Here, I think somewhere. Here, basically, again, these two parts were already correctly blinded. And this is just the public stuff, and this one you can compute as a simulator. So basically, there was only this part where something could break. And the thing is, I think maybe in the very first version of PLONK, because PLONK is a paper which has like, I don't know, more than 40 or 50 versions on ePrint. I think in the very original version, maybe they didn't even split this. And then at some point, someone thought, oh, maybe we can split it and to make it more like efficient, to reduce our SRS size, and maybe this was kind of just done as a change, but no one really thought about the implications this has on the zero knowledge. Yeah.
And either way, this is like, as you say, this is like the basic PLONK. Like you're here maybe not adding lookup tables in this proof structure. Maybe you're not adding all of the others. Additions that you can make to PLONK. So I wonder, like, if there's such an issue from the very starting version of PLONK, maybe as soon as other teams start modifying it at will, maybe we are introducing these vulnerabilities for zero knowledge if we don't analyze them properly, right? This is just a reflection, not a real question.
Just one final thing on that. So as far as I understand, these other this versions of PLONK that support custom gates and other stuff, the way I understand it is that you just add more stuff. to your constraint polynomials or to witness polynomials. And then when you
On
do
that
the
side,
division, you still
okay.
get some value t, like final quotient. You still get that. Maybe the degree of that will be even larger than 3n. So then maybe
Mhm.
you would have to split even in more
Just
parts
kidding.
than just 3. And it's basically you probably have the same problem if you don't randomize this step when you split it. But
Mhm.
yeah. All right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thanks for the remarks.
I kind of
you.
want to wrap up very soon, so I realize we're already a bit past 1 hour, but I wanted to squeeze in one question for myself, if that's all right.
Sure.
I'm using my power. So can you show me again the fix that you presented? I was wondering, so that is, how does it affect the degree? I'm not exactly sure I understand. So the T polynomial T1, T2, and T3 are all degree n, or are they n-1?
They're n-1 because they're n coefficients. I mean, strictly speaking, let me just go into the paper here. Then I think the degree is actually not quite n, but you need up to n plus 2 degree or something. So then when we do where is it? 1 second. Yeah, when we do this, like I think the original polynomials are all degree less than or equal to n plus 1. But then when you randomize it in this way, you add here, x to the n plus 2. So they basically increase the degree of these by randomizing them by 1, which I mean intuitively also makes sense because you kind of add these two, scalars here, and it's kind of like randomizing the polynomials. So it's kind of like adding one more coefficient that's right now a random coefficient, basically. It's kind of, yeah. Maybe you can think about it, as like, where is it? Like here, but basically this whole thing where we only have like a single degree of freedom or something, which we randomize. Yeah.
I'm wondering how this affects performance. I really have like no good intuition right now, but I think the original motivation. By the way, I shared the link to the Mina book, where there's a description of in this chat. There's a description of what is done in Kimchi concretely, and I think the main motivation behind doing this last row dummy rows variant of zero knowledge approach is exactly to avoid, I think, increasing the degree of the original polynomials too much. So I'm not sure if increasing the degree here by 1 or 2 actually hurts anything. It's hard. It's very hard for me to say.
So I think it's really important to make a distinction between how the witness polynomials are randomized and how the quotient polynomial is randomized, basically, or how the split quotient polynomial is randomized. I'm feeling is, without reading through this, that this probably refers to how we like randomize, these parts here, like how we do this part here, which is a different technique, like adding this multiple of z or zh or zs, whatever is vanishing polynomials. So this, of course, changes. So the more we have to randomize.
I'm sorry. I think the main point here is that what you say have the slide is that row 1x times zx has a higher degree than what you have on the right hand side otherwise.
Yes,
right?
yes. Here, exactly. The degree here is increased, and this even can increase the SRS size if you needed even more. Like if this had a high degree, this polynomial here. But the fix, which now is different, there's no ZH here, right? There's a different way to randomize these polynomials. I guess here we can see it. So we define them as these expressions instead of just T1, T2, instead of just the original T1, T2, T3. And here we just add like 1 degree, or like increase the degree by 1 of each of these. I guess this one stays the same, but these two, we increase these 2 degrees by 1. But this does not change our SRS size because the SRS already has to support, like the other commitments we need already have degree n plus 2 basically. So we didn't increase the SRS size at all here with this change.
Makes sense. Thank you. Okay.
So just stuff where the SRS could change is here at the beginning. Sorry, here, right? You see when this A, B, and C are defined, and also later on this polynomial. There, when we add this part here, if we needed even more evaluations, since I guess I tried to explain, if you added linear polynomial, we can like reveal 2 points. If you have like a quadratic polynomial, we can reveal 3 points and so on. But since we only need to reveal 2 here, this is all fine. But if you needed more, if you added, more degrees, or increase the degree more here, then you would need a longer SRS, which would not be so nice.
Okay, I think there is definitely a discussion to be had within the team after the meeting at some point. It's quite peculiar. I'm still not exactly sure I understand the exact implications of this on kimchi, but yeah, I'm happy to discuss it later off the recording.
Yeah, sure. And if you can like reach out to me if there's anything I can help with.
That'd be great. Okay, so since we're 10 minutes late, I'd like to ask everyone to thank Marek again. It was a great presentation. Thanks a lot, and I'll stop the recording here.